You have this insane adventure CV. You've rowed an ocean, you've swam from one continent to another, you've climbed mountains that many people dream of climbing. Now you've just completed running a marathon in the most remote places on every continent in the world. This is a list that many people would love to achieve in a lifetime, but you've done this by the age of 24.
If you're ever going to have this chance, you've got to go for it now. And this is just the foundation. Like, these first 2 years are nothing compared to what I want to do and what I have planned.
It's so exciting to follow you now and to see which direction and which path that you would take.
I'm not defined or focused on one discipline, because for me it's about the story and it's about the impact I can have with it.
Your grandfather was biggest inspiration.
My granddad was Captain Rick Taylor. He served in the British Army for 38 years, but he was his battle against dementia, which sadly took his life. He was supposed to go off and live the life that he deserved doing these adventures, but he was stripped of those opportunities from this, well, in my mind, one of the most devastating illnesses in the world. When he passed, I just made a promise, and that was to support this fight against dementia until the day we find a cure. And that promise has now in many ways defined my life. Going to these remote places just highlighted that dementia is in every corner of the world.
What was that journey like?
Antarctica was particularly unpredictable. It became a challenge of almost survival. They give you the strangest advice ever. Go out and run, but don't sweat. The Agafe Desert in northern Africa, that was close to 40 degrees, really humid. I got stuck in a rainstorm in the rainforest, got chased by a pack of wild dogs. But it's that moment of like, I need to survive here. But as my challenges grow, so must my purpose. Raising the money for charity is wonderful. The awareness is wonderful. But now, what else can I do?
We're recording this in January. We're in a bit of a cold snap at the moment. How is this compared to the cold that you've faced in recent months? You've just been to Antarctica and the Arctic Circle in recent months, where you get proper cold this time of year. Do you kind of walk out on the streets and think, oh, this is not quite the cold that I'm used to?
Well, I can't seem to escape it. Can I come home and back into the cold? But no, this is nothing compared to what it was like. Arctic wasn't too bad, but Antarctica was quite bad. And it's more so the wind out there. Minus 25, the wind chill, and just harsh conditions. And it's, this is great. It's a little bit cold when you go outside, but then you can come home to, your apartment, your home, whatever it may be, and, have a little bit of warmth, hopefully. Whereas in Antarctica, it's hard to escape, the elements.
Well, how do you escape the elements in Antarctica? Where were you staying?
We were camping. So we had these tents. I don't know the exact name for them, but we were in these tents. And actually the tents were a weird thing, because it was so cold when you're outside and you're told, we had this safety briefing, you've got to cover all your skin at all times. 20 minutes of exposed skin can lead to frostbite or various other issues. And then you walk into your tent and sometimes you have to sort of like just strip down straight into, your boxes or something, because it's so hot in the tents. Because the sun, there's no ozone layer because of the lack of pollution there. And the sun is so strong and it bounces off the snow, and these tents become like saunas actually. So actually, maybe I go back on what I said. Actually, you can find that warmth, but it's actually the total opposite. So when we were sleeping, I didn't have a sleeping bag or anything. I was just sleeping in this tent without anything because it was so warm. But then there's that huge contrast. Then when you unzip it and you step outside, it's horrendous to some degree, but it's also pretty amazing.
That's insane. But does it still keep the heat overnight when the sun's not there?
Oh, absolutely, because the light is...
Is it always sunny in Antarctica in the winter? Southern hemisphere.
And I made many mistakes on that trip, and one of them is absolutely forgetting to bring a sleeping mask and having to use, some random t-shirt or something to cover my eyes, because 24 hours of daylight, that's a really strange thing. And it's hard to actually manage, your circadian rhythm in that, because I think if we had time out there, I was only there for 67 hours in total. So it wasn't enough time to adapt to anything really. I think if you had a bit more time out there, maybe you could get used to it. But, I was speaking, when I was doing the Arctic one just before that, I was speaking to the guys there, and, they have so little daylight at some points of the year, and then at some points they have loads. And, I think it's quite tough to adapt.
So you did two very different extremes. You did the Northern Hemisphere, the Arctic Circle in Norway. Mm-hmm. Was it about a month or two before you then went to Antarctica?
A month, yeah.
So you went somewhere where there was hardly any daylight.
Yeah.
To then where there was complete daylight and no darkness.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about it like that. Absolutely. I mean, the Arctic in many ways, when I first started working on this project, I always knew I wanted to do the Arctic just before Antarctica. It was almost a preparation and acclimatization, for Antarctica, which worked. It gave me that sort of possibility to adapt to the cold. But no, it's true, the daylight, I didn't think about that too much. We didn't have much time to run the marathon. You only have a handful of hours. So it did start to go dark towards the end, because I'm sure, as we'll get into, I'm not that fast for a runner. So I'm sure yourself, you'd be fine. You'd have plenty of daylight, but I struggle to beat the daylight.
This is in the Arctic Circle?
This is in the Arctic, yeah.
Wow. How long is that window of time for the sun up there?
I think in the worst parts of winter, it could be like 3 or 4 hours. So,
That's insane.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
We'll come on to this. You're talking about your 7 marathons you've done in 7 different continents. You have this insane adventure CV. You've rowed an ocean.
Well, the English Channel.
It's an ocean. It's an ocean.
Do we count? Okay.
It's more of an ocean than I've rowed.
Right, okay.
You've swam from one continent to another.
Yeah.
Including other swims. You've climbed mountains that many people dream of climbing. Now you've just completed running a marathon in the most remote places on every continent in the world. This is a list that many people would love to achieve in a lifetime. But you've done this by the age of 24. It's quite remarkable.
The first word that comes to me is very lucky. I never think about it like that in the sense of listing them all out. But in that sense, yeah, I'm very, very lucky.
If you think of most people's adventure bucket lists, you've done some big things that people still have on their list and they could be in their 40s and 50s.
I think that the 7 marathons, 7 continents, especially for lots of people, that's a big one. That's one of their dreams. And I mean, we've all got dreams. And I think if you meet many sort of adventurers, whatever level they may be, you know, dreams is a big part of being an adventurer. I think dreaming and adventuring is in many ways synonymous. But found this very unique position at a young age where these dreams have become plans and then the plans have become reality. And yeah, I'm 24 now. I've been doing it just over 2 years full time. And yeah, the list is starting to grow.
Okay, well, let's come on to your most recent challenge soon. Let's come back to that. I want to try and break down the how, the why, that you've been able to formulate this lifestyle that's now a career for you, that's been able to do these amazing things at such a young age. What was the earliest instance that you thought that you could be an adventurer? Were you adventurous as a kid?
Not particularly. I was sporty as a kid, played rugby, football, various sports, you know, at school, mainly team sports. But my first adventure when I was 19, but there was no plan there to this is going to be my career. I'm going to do this full time. It was, I wanted to go out and do one adventure and then crack on with the life, whatever that may be. And my first ever adventure was when I was 19. So 5 years ago, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I found out it was my granddad's dream to climb this mountain in Africa. You know, it's the tallest freestanding mountain in the world, 5,895 meters tall. But sadly, he never had the opportunity. You know, it was his plan to do it in his retirement after his time in the army. He served in the army for 38 years. He served all around the world, but it was his 17-year-long battle against dementia, which took his life far too early. And when I found out at 19 that was his dream, I said, well, I've got to go out there and climb for him, climb in his honor, fulfill that, you know, dream for him, and hold his name at the summit. And although I went out there for him, which I did, and I went out there also for Alzheimer's Research UK, and we raised some great money for the charity, I also returned home with something for myself, which was this new gift of adventure, you know, this new purpose, this new passion. And it changed everything for me. That 1 week in Tanzania on that mountain, I mean, I owe so much to that mountain and to the people there because it changed everything for me. But the whole gift of adventure I owe to my grandfather because he gave me that.
It's very poignant that it took the passing of your granddad for you to motivate you to go and do one of the things that he never was able to achieve. And it shows your determination that you just went and did that so soon, because it could have been something that you had and kept with you for years before you acted on it, but you acted on it pretty much almost immediately. And because of that, that's now set you on this new course to do more crazy, adventurous, exploring things.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I found out about that dream when I was 18. So it was just after A-levels. And then I think, about 9 months later, I was 19 at that point, and I went out there and did it. So I gave myself some time to prepare, and I think I really didn't need that much time, but it was mainly about, you know, at that time, finding the money to do it myself, also raised money for charity for the first time and so on. But it just changed my life, changed everything. And when I came home, then that sort of, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to continue this as a bit of a hobby. And I got into a few sort of ultras and little smaller challenges while I was trying to work things out. And then for the next sort of 3 years or so, that's what I did. You know, I was basically going from job to job, trying different careers and, you know, failing in most of them, not because I was getting fired, just because it wasn't my passion.
What kind of careers were these?
All sorts, just trying different things, you know, working just in random jobs, you know, at a golf course, at a gym, just random things. I was just trying to work things out. That's what it was. I knew I didn't want to go to university. I knew if I did go to university, which my school was pushing, that I would be going just for the social life, and that would have lasted maybe a month or two. I knew that was a waste of my time. But I was trying to work things out. But what was growing behind the scenes was this hobby, and they were growing and growing without even realizing I was learning how to fundraise more for charity. I was learning to get little bits of sponsorship. I was learning how to build up, social media or whatever it may be. And then that led to, 2.5 years ago in November 2021, the 16th of November, I remember the day I decided this is it. This is my new thing. And I looked at my life basically and realized I can either enjoy hobbies as an adventure and, find something which, can help fund it, or I can look at it and go, right, can I make, my hobby, my life, my career, my everything. And then my parents are amazing. I've got the best parents in the world. And they said, well, this is your time to do it. You're 22, you've got no commitments. If you're ever going to have this chance, you've got to go for it now. And I went, right, I'm all in. And that day I made my first website. I put it on LinkedIn, new chapter, ... And it just went from there.
That's incredible. Clearly, at such a young age, you have that ability to try things, knowing that if you fail, it's not going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
And you did this with the jobs that you did, but also knowing that, I think I've got this inkling that I want to try and be a professional in this kind of adventure world. Great that at 21 years old, you can just go out and do that.
It's amazing. And yeah, when you remove that thing about the fear of failure, in fact, I think in many ways, my fear of failure was less then when I was that age, because, I just didn't mind if I did fail, because I knew you had to take those leaps and those risks. And I'd learned that from my parents, that taking risks is very, very important. And it was a pretty amazing time to look back. But I was very, very lucky. The position I was in to be able to have supportive parents who say, this is time to go for it. And I knew, right, if I'm going to do this, whatever it may be. At the time, I didn't know it'd be professional explorer. That sort of developed in the last couple of years by sponsors and press and things. But, I looked up to the likes of, your Steve Backshalls, your Ben Fogels, your Bear Grylls. I looked up to these guys, and I could see it was as a career. If you use the ability to storytell, and that's a big skill which you've got to practice and you've got to develop. It doesn't just come naturally. It certainly hasn't come naturally for me, but I knew it was potential. It was a possibility. So I decided to go for it, but I knew I had to do two things if I wanted to make this, make this successful. My first project, I had to do two things. I had to first of all honor my granddad, because he was the reason I'd first found this 3 years before. And secondly, I had to do something big to get that momentum going. And I knew I didn't have many opportunities. I had this one chance. I had to really go for it. And that's when I came up with this idea to run 17 marathons in 17 consecutive days in honor of the 17 years my granddad lived with dementia. And that was very tough, which I'm sure we'll get into, but it was amazing.
Are you a runner?
No.
Yourself a runner?
No, absolutely not. If we went for a run right now, I guarantee I would be struggling to keep up with you. I'm not a runner. I'm not an athlete. I'm certainly not an athlete. And that's why when I get into my training camps and other sort of things I have to do, I take it so seriously, because it doesn't come naturally. None of it comes naturally, actually. And I think if it did, I probably wouldn't enjoy it. But no, I'm definitely not a runner. And I have a love-hate relationship with running. I love to hate it in many ways, but I still struggle every run.
So this was a real challenge, 17 consecutive marathons in a row.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason I started getting into those bits of running when I was doing it as a hobby for those 3 years was because obviously COVID happened, and that, offered sort of various other challenges when I was trying to work things out in terms of careers and things. And I ended up, spending a lot of time volunteering for a disaster response charity called React. And I learned a lot about life in those situations, working at, sort of temporary mortuaries and doing various COVID testing. These people were really doing amazing things during such a tough time for so many. And that's when this hobby was building. And all we really could do was run, right? Because you couldn't obviously travel. You weren't allowed to go abroad or go really to the mountains. I was in London. So that's when I started running. And that's when my friends got carried away, because they knew how much I hated running. Right, I was a forward in rugby, right? We were known to be heavy and strong, but not to run very fast or far. And that's when, things started to get a bit sort of carried away in terms of they started donating more and more to the charity, because they knew I'd have to run. And then I knew if I did this big 17 and 17 days, it would hopefully get a bit of momentum, because people know, hang on, this is not easy for anyone, let alone for someone who's not a strong runner.
So where did you do these marathons?
We did them all over. So because I wanted to do it for my grandfather and for Alzheimer's Research UK, again, I decided to run in sort of 17 different locations where trying to highlight where the research labs are for the charity. So we ran Started in Sheffield outside my granddad's care home where he passed away. We ran in Bath, Cardiff, York, London, all over. So trying to highlight, the work that is being done, because I think when we talk about dementia, we talk about Alzheimer's, we're always talking about for a cure, which is what we're striving for. But we've got to remember that work is being done now. And there are small successes which are constantly happening in that world of research. So I wanted to highlight the people and the work they're putting in right now and where people's money is going. But that actually was one of the toughest parts logistically, because you'd finish a marathon, then you'd have to get into the back of a car for 3 or 4 hours and then get to the hotel. It was really tough.
Yeah. Any kind of challenge that involves traveling in between the places and then consecutively knowing that you have to get out and run the next day is adding a complexity level that's beyond what you can do if you're just in one place at the same time.
100%. It's really, really tough. And, at the time as well, I was running all the logistics myself, all the sponsorship, the press, I was doing it all myself. So that added some challenges too. And it was like the perfect sort of initiation into this new career, because everything, went wrong, went right. And it was like I learned everything in that very first adventure. And those 17 days were so transformative. And it did start that momentum. My two main sponsors, Thomas Franks, the Body Lab, I met during that very first adventure. And all these little things, it all started from that 17 and 17 days. And it was really, really tough. If we talk about the actual run, the first 9 days were pretty smooth, but then on day 10, I woke up with a chest infection, a fever, and shin splints, and everything changed. And those final 8 days were like the perfect test before this, career really started. See if I actually really wanted to do this. It was like the perfect, this is what it's going to be. This is just a snippet of what's, to come. Can you handle this? It's like the perfect test.
Yes, day 10, chest infection, shin splints.
Horrendous.
They're not exactly ideal conditions to be running a marathon in.
No way. I mean, some of them I was to blame for. The shin splints I was to blame for, because we've been running on lots of running tracks at the universities, where these research labs were, and I'd made the mistake of not turning around. So I was running in one direction, and actually I think I can't remember what day it was, but it was Oxford University, one of the heads of the running club, very kindly, who's like, I'll come and join you in the morning, I'll set you off and I'll come back in the afternoon as you're finishing. He came back in the afternoon, he's like, you're still running the same way, Louis? I was like, yeah, of course I am. I'm still running. And he's like, no, you're still running the same way. Why didn't you turn around? And I didn't realize, you're putting that little bit of strain on one side more than the other. And day 10, my body couldn't handle it. So I woke up with shivers on day 10, like it was horrendous. And it was that real tough challenge of, can you do this? And actually, sort of one of those most poignant moments of my life where, like, my mum and dad were my chief support crew during that challenge. And I had some friends as well who were helping me. And my mum woke me up and she was like, do you want to go outside and run? It's like, no. Do you want to quit? No.
So what are you going to do then? Yeah.
Let's get out. And I got out, and that first 5 kilometers on day 10, and I'm not afraid to say this, the first 5 kilometers took me 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
5 kilometers took me 3 hours.
That's slower than a walking pace.
I couldn't walk. I was hobbling, and I feel so guilty for putting my parents and my friends through this, because I just became this sort of shell, and it was horrendous. I couldn't put any pressure on my left shin, felt like glass. I've never experienced anything like this. And it was also the mental side of not knowing, is also knowing I've got to go out and also do a marathon on this. There's no possibility to fail here. I've got to do this. Not only am I doing this now to start my new career and everything, I'm also doing this for my granddad. Nothing's more important than honoring my granddad, right? So the first 3 hours were horrendous. My dad's running around to the local shops trying to find remedies, running in, and people are like, what do you mean he's got to run a marathon with shin splints? There's no answer for that. Phoning up physios. All of them refused to work with us. He phoned about a dozen physios. None of them would work with us.
I mean, their advice is just don't run.
Their advice is rest. And I was like, no, you don't get it. And I said to them, if you don't understand what I'm doing anyway, I don't want to work with you anyway. That's what I said. Things obviously have changed now. I've got a team around me who know how serious this stuff is. And we know, we've got to work through things sometimes. But those first 3 hours are horrendous. And I remember my dad actually saying to me, like, son, if you need to cry, cry. I was like, thanks, Dad. And my dad's a very stoic guy. I couldn't cry. I was in so much pain. I was just empty. And I've never experienced anything like that, actually. And it gives me a bit of goosebumps talking about it with you now, because it was one of those moments. It was like, what do you do? So I just took one step in front of the other and the other. In the end, I think the day probably took 8-9 hours, probably. But it was horrendous. It wasn't joyful. It wasn't pretty. fair, nothing I do is pretty or perfect, but that certainly wasn't. And then, day 10, day 11 was quite bad as well. And day 12 started to hobble a little bit more. I had a friend who I'd met at React, the disaster response charity. She was a previous medic in the army, and she taught me to wrap shin splints around, ice packs around my shin splints, so it wouldn't heal them, but it would maybe just numb the pain, and that started to improve. So every marathon, then from day 12 to 17, we'd change the ice packs 4 times. And if some people might have seen the photos, we've got these big bright pink sort of ice packs around my shins. That's what we were doing. And then started to run a little bit more on day 12, 13, 14. By day 17, somehow I did a sub 5 marathon. I don't know how, but pretty amazing what the mind can do when you have that purpose. As long as you can carry your body through some pretty impressive things, actually.
I've suffered with shin splints and stress fractures, which is kind of the kind of extrapolation of that. It is mightily painful every step you take. It's just that jolting pain in your leg.
Yeah.
I cannot fathom how you was able to do multiple marathons even after that.
Well, I mean, compared to what someone's gone through, it's nothing, right? But for me, starting this new thing, I was 22 at the time. This was, the toughest thing I'd definitely faced physically, mentally, emotionally. And actually went into the body lab just after finishing, and Manuele, the osteopath there, he was trying to sort of dissect what's happened and this, that. And it was so inflamed, my left leg, even, a few days after that, he couldn't actually tell what it was. And the MRI scan wouldn't even, or whatever scan he was using, it couldn't even come up because it was so inflamed. He was like, it could be fractured, it could be shin splint. Who knows? But actually the body started to heal pretty quickly. And 2 weeks later, I was with friends skiing in Canada, and then rowing the English Channel a month after that. So
there must have been so much that you learned in those 17 days as a kind of introduction to how you need to prepare your body and micromanage little things to ensure that these things wouldn't happen again on any future challenge that you did. So how important were those 17 days in formulating new plans going forward and new practices that you've changed since?
Well, I learned a lot because I made a lot of mistakes. I learned, first of all, and I learned this with everything I do, but I learned how important support crews are. I learned that you can't do all of this on your own. That was for sure. And I owe the success of that challenge to my parents, to my friends who made it all possible, and actually to the Body Lab as well, because they supported me with some recovery throughout, and I was doing the hyperbaric oxygen chamber in the evenings, and all of that really did help. But I only gave myself 3 months to prepare for that. So when I decided to go full-time in that November the 16th, I then started the challenge in Feb. So I had 3 months. So that was my first mistake, giving myself 3 months to prepare for 17 marathon days. I didn't do any consecutive marathons in training, so that was another failure on my part. I learned a lot about preparation, probably more than anything. I learned a lot about support crew, but I also gained a lot, and I gained a lot of confidence. And actually what adventure's done for me, and I hope and I pray it can do it for so many others, is it removed a lot of ego from me. I carried a little bit of ego when I used to play rugby at school. But adventure sort of stripped that and replaced it with a bit of confidence, because I could walk around and say, I didn't need to say anything. I just felt confident in myself that I know I can actually do these things. And when you publicly announce, which you have to, with these adventures, you've got to publicly announce you do them before you want to do them. In many ways you would like to do them, and then maybe you can share it after or not. It's up to you. But when you're working with sponsors and press and things, you need to put it out there. And when you put out, I'm doing 17 marathons, 17 days, and your friends and whoever know you're a terrible runner, it receives some interesting reception, right? So lots of people think you're not going to do it. But then when you can do it, it gives you that little bit of confidence of like, I can keep my promises. I'm a man of my word. That's what it's all about.
But what a story it is when people know that you're not doing something that you're good at, that they can appreciate that you're going to be challenged by this. And this is not something that you're naturally kind of been accustomed to or built yourself up to over years. That's what really gets people, when they can understand that you're going to be pushing yourself to real deep depths.
I hope so. And I hope people, there's so many lessons from these adventures. And what I think so beautiful is you can sort of implement these into any part of your life, in any, whatever you do for work or wherever you're from, whatever, these lessons, they transfer into everyone. And I hope some people maybe took that away. I really hope so. Are you a natural runner, or what's your background as a runner?
It's a very interesting story.
Okay.
I was forced to run as a very young child by my cruel dad.
Okay.
Because I think we'd moved house and we lived away from like the school area. So I was being driven to school. I think actually at the time I'd put on a little bit of weight. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, probably became a little bit chubby. And his excuse was, we're now no longer walking to school, so we need to do some exercise at home.
Okay.
As a family, me, my mum and my sister who's 3 years older than me, we all went out for our first ever run. And it's such a small distance now that I think about it. We ran down to the local garden centre, which is basically there and back, must be a quarter of a mile.
Okay.
But because I'd never run before, it was the most painful thing that I'd ever been forced to do. That I think I just cried the entire way. Most traumatic experience of my life at that point.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated my dad for forcing me to do that.
Right.
But he's a kind of person he's a very good parent, and he's not afraid to do things that are not kind of comfortable and nice, knowing that it's better for me in the future. Mm-hmm. So rather than be my best friend, he's a dad. And so he knew that, and he was always a runner. He did like a few half marathons and marathons.
Okay, amazing.
So that's what he knew in terms of like exercise. So he, the only thing he knew to get me fit was to force me to do a run. And he didn't know the best practices of doing that, but he knew that that was the best thing for me to do. So while his methods might not be the best, his intentions are always from the heart.
Okay.
And then a series after that, we were forced to go and run a little bit longer. And again, I hated them. But eventually, after some time, it just clicked. And I think when I was probably early teenager, I started going off on my own. And when you go off for a run on your own without your parents forcing you, that's when you're starting to explore the fact that something you might enjoy. Yeah. And this was days before we had like GPS data, and it'd be so interesting to kind of, if I did have that data of that first ever run. But we used to have a little route that went around an abandoned railway near where we live, which is like a public footpath now. Really nice place to walk. And there's also a canal that's parallel to that. And one of these loops we'd do, which I think is only about 3 kilometers, but we'd time it on a stopwatch from the moment we left the house to the moment we came back again. And that was our way of recording that run. And this was like the railway run, 20 minutes or something. Or the canal run, 25. Okay. And just we would note that. And then, eventually my times became faster and faster. And I don't know what they were now because it's so long ago. But I just developed this love after my dad forcing me to do it. So I am really always interested in how people get into running, because I never had that journey myself. It was a journey that was forced upon me.
That's interesting. Okay.
So I'm always curious by people's mindsets and how they choose to want to do it themselves.
So the decision with starting to run wasn't with you, but the decision to continue running was yours. When you said you made that decision to go out on your own, that moment of like, I'm going to do it on my own, for me, that responsibility, that was probably your key running moment. Then.
Yeah, I got the running bug, yeah.
That's interesting.
It's been a part of my life since then. More so in the last 3 years since COVID. I think I took it a bit more seriously, and now it's become like a daily thing for me. But in between those years, from being a teenager to a few years ago, it was just something that I did once, twice a week, just casually, just something I knew that I needed to do to keep fit. And within that, there's been different waves of, progression or no running at all for a few months at a time. Okay.
But now you're doing this 496 and you're making it look easy. So
yeah, currently doing Sean Conway's 496 challenge. I wouldn't say maybe making it look easy. I don't know if it's making it look easy. I think I've done it before, so I've been there. And the way I'm doing it by drawing out a number out of the mug every morning is, I know that no combination of those will be as worse as doing it the traditional way in the last week, when you have to do the 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, all in succession. So I've done that. Yeah. And so anything now that I do is never going to be as bad as that. Right.
Okay. But isn't that amazing when you have been there before? That experience can give you that confidence, can't it? That when you approach it the next time, it removes maybe some of that fear. because sometimes when we plan these adventures, we think about all the things that could obviously go right, but also we think about all the things that go wrong. And often that list, sometimes what could go wrong is bigger than what could go right.
Oh, the first time I did this was going into the unknown. And the longest one I'd ever done before this, when I did this the last time, was 24 kilometers. I'd never run more than that.
Okay.
So when I got to day 25, I was then setting my longest ever distance of running, and then 26, and then 27. And so I approached this really tentatively by doing really kind of slow runs, not kind of pushing myself too much. I went out and enjoyed the trails. I just wanted to be outside. Now, if I do a long run, I'm sometimes like, just go as fast as I can to get it done, because I just don't want to be spending too much time out in the cold. And I know that however my legs feel, I'll be recovered enough to kind of do something, whether it's slow or fast the next day, no matter how big it's going to be, because I've been there and been in that place before. Interesting. So yeah, it is very interesting about how, when you return to these things, or how challenges like this build you. And that really kind of the first time I did the 496 challenge really unlocked potential in me that I didn't realize I had, and how I started my run streak from that. And I've been running every day since that, because at the end of that challenge, I had like 31 days in a row that I'd run. I'd never run that much before consecutively in a row before.
It's amazing. And that's tough. 31, and those are big runs as well. No, credit to you. That's amazing. That's really amazing.
Okay. So where does your experience with mountaineering fit into all of your kind of the range and your adventurous CV?
Well, I suppose because the first challenge was a mountain, that love, it started there, and that sort of ignited the fire for the passion for mountains. I decided shortly after the 70 marathon, 70 days, I did the English Channel Road, and then that summer I decided I wanted to take that my next step in the mountains, because everything I do, I try and do it progressively and also properly. So I'm all about building things up, and a big reason I'm not going out tomorrow and going, right, I'm going to walk the South Pole, I'm going to climb Everest, is because I know I need to build up my experience. I'm 24. I need to build up my actual experience of physical, mental endurance, and my ability to raise the money, to the sponsorship, my ability to do everything. I've got to build things up properly. And I think I have that advantage very luckily because of age in that sense. But when I decided I want to go back to mountains, I knew I had to take that more progressive step in my mountaineering career, which was to try a bit of like sort of alpine mountaineering. So I decided to go to the Alps and climb Grandparent Paradox, which is the tallest mountain entirely in Italy, and then Mont Blanc, tallest mountain in Western Europe, and try and do them in the same week. And Mont Blanc especially was pretty interesting.
I don't know much about mountaineering, but okay. Am I right in assuming that Mont Blanc is not an easy mountain to climb?
It's not incredibly high. I think it's about 4,500 meters, but it has about 100 deaths a year. It's one of the most dangerous mountains in that sense. So you definitely don't want to underestimate it. And I think very sadly, I think a week after we climbed, there was a British climber who lost their life in a very spot, which we had a sticky moment. So I think mountains in general, regardless of their size, their height, you can't take any of them for granted.
What was that journey like?
It was difficult. I mean, we got to one of the last huts on Mont Blanc you climb, and you have like these almost like I think one's called the Goutte hut, and you have like all these huts where there's accommodation and things you can stay in. They're pretty good actually. Some of them have like a kitchen almost. So there's also actually like a warm food and things, and they're actually built into the side of these mountains. And we got to this last hut, and we were on summit day, and we had another, I think we'd been climbing for 6 hours or so, you start shortly after midnight. And I think I was in a 2-person team and with one guide. We had one of the really good guides, and the person I was with, they dropped out because they were too fatigued. They said, I'm going to stay in this hut. And we were already climbing quite a difficult time. There had been some high winds. There's a crevasse near the top of the route we were climbing. So my guide Fabio made the decision to climb around the Italian side to add an extra hour to our summit day. So in the end, it took 12 hours door to door. But there was one point where we hit some ice on the mountain, and the winds were so high, we hadn't spoken all day. And he turns around to me. We're roped together, in the idea that if one of us falls or slips, we can catch each other. And he turns to me, and we hadn't spoken all the time we were in the mountains because the winds were so high. And he pulls down his buff, which was covering his face, and he shouts, if one of us fall, we can't catch each other. Lifts his buff back up, and he turns around, and it was like in that second I was like, you have a decision to make. You can freeze, which is very easy to do, or you can focus. And I knew you can't freeze, and that's the decision's out of your hands almost, because you've got to carry on climbing, because the longer you stay there, the longer you're open to these conditions. We were on, I think they called it live ice, and it's like it's unpredictable. It can go at any point, and you have to traverse it looking down the mountain. So you traverse it sideways, and it's quite intimidating. But that was quite a poignant moment.
He's almost telling you that at no point can you fall.
Yeah.
Because we will both fall.
Yeah, and you're paying this guide and to look after you, keep you safe, and that's what their promise is. And then you get to the halfway up the mountain, or on summit day, and they say, no, can't look after you anymore. And it's also that point that if he was to slip, I wouldn't be able to catch him either. And he would take me with him. So he was a big guy as well. So we were both about 100 kilos, 95 kilos at the time. So that was quite an interesting moment. We managed to get up and we summited around the long way. We actually were like one of he was like one of the top guys in the mountain. So he almost led the way. We had a few groups behind us. We actually had Preet Chandy. She was climbing below us. I think she was doing some glacier training. So you had some serious people on the mountain that day, and summited, got back down. Yeah, it was just tough day.
Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. Where in your life has swimming played a part in, how have you got a love for swimming?
Well, if we continue for the 17, I knew before, when I also planned that 17, I also planned the whole year out. I knew I wanted to do 6 things in my first year as a professional explorer. And one of those, I knew I wanted to hit some key points, because when it comes down to my actual planning stage and my dreaming stage, it's not really always about the challenge for me. It's about the story, and it's about the impact I can have with it. And I think like the 7 maths, 7 continents, a perfect example of that. It's all sometimes about working backwards. So actually, for me, it's not always about the run or whatever it may be. But in this example, I wanted to, first of all, try all these different disciplines, a bit of mountaineering, a little bit of swimming, rowing, running in this first year. But I also wanted to show that I'm not defined or sort of focused on one discipline. If you look at some amazing athletes, right, they're full-time triathletes, or they focus just on running, and that's great, because what happens is they become really, really good at it. Someone like Nick Butter, he's one of my mentors. He is an incredible runner, potentially the goat of adventure running, right? But that's his discipline, that's his focus. And what he's done with that is amazing. But that's not necessarily my passion. Because for me, it's about what's behind the adventures a little bit more. Yeah, I think it is. So
it's so interesting. I think like you're doing it for you as well. You're doing things that you want to try and do. You're not trying to try and fit a mold that you think people might subscribe to, because they're like, that's now the thing in this world. If you have a niche in certain things, people subscribe to that because they want to have that in their feed, right?
Right.
It's like I do these like music videos, let's say, and like if you put out a music video every day, then that's like great. I want to see that every day. But if you have this like range and do different things, then people kind of don't quite know what you are, who you are, right? But over time, that'll build into a much bigger picture, and people will appreciate that. But in the long term, but in the short term, if you want success in this social media world now, you have to have this one defining thing that says, this is what I am. But I love the fact that you are just gonna, almost like the same experimental thing that you just tried different jobs, and it's just like, I'm just gonna have this, I'm prepared to take a risk and try all these different things, because I know that's going to make me a bigger whole. Because rather than build upwards, I'm going to build across and have this foundation that's going to make me stronger in years to come.
Absolutely. And, I've also got many dreams outside of the adventure world as well, and I think, the thing about working across is, over time, first of all, I need to find also what I'm really good at. I haven't really found that yet, of what I actually really, what specific, discipline I'm really good at. Because, I'm a terrible runner, and maybe a okay swimmer, and then maybe a decent mountaineer, but I'm not good, or I don't have a natural advantage in any of these. So I'm still working that out. That's definitely one reason I'm trying many things. But also, I don't want to be defined by one sport or one discipline, because it's just not my passion. It's not my interest. And I hope, maybe social media wise, it's not the best thing, business, thinking business strategy and stuff, to not niche or focus on one thing, but that's not my main priority. Really.
That's only really considering the short-term gains, I think. And I think the long-term gains is by having this range, and people then subscribe to the fact that you have so much more to you than just this one thing that might only last like 5 years.
Well, that's very kind. I hope so. And my in that term, I do think long term, I am in this adventure exploration world. Hopefully for the long term, I'd love to be doing this, for the next 30, 40, 50 years. You look up to like Serrano Fines.
Yeah.
And although my other dreams outside the adventure world, they do link in with this in some way, whether it be TV and things like that. So I am thinking long term for sure. And that's why the things I do and plan and implement, I try and, some of the best advice I've ever given when I decided to go full time was from Ben Saunders. Have you had a chat with Ben? Ben Saunders, he's a great guy, polar explorer, incredible what he's done. And he gave me the advice: if you want to be a professional explorer, be professional. And it was the most simple but amazing advice. And that's why from the start, I've tried to really focus on that, because I understand the foundation I build now. And this is just the foundation, right? These first 2 years are nothing compared to what I want to do and what I have planned. But this is the foundation. And I need to put in the right sort of attitude and foundation into these first few years, because this is what hopefully will set that precedent for the rest of my career. So that's why, starting to build a team around me, that's why taking things seriously from the start is so important, and putting that attention and care in. Because if it was a hobby, of course it's different. You just do it for fun and no one needs to know about it. But because I want to do this for that, hopefully, like you said, which is really kind of you to say, I'm glad it comes across that way, like that long-term plan. I've got to think big picture.
And who knows what you might be doing in 10 years' time, where you can be like, this thing that I'm doing now, like 10 years ago when I swam across from Alcatraz, I can take what I learned from that experience when I was just doing something just to challenge myself and see, what I could find in that moment. Yeah. It's actually going to formulate plans in the future. But like, actually, now I did that thing. Yeah. This will help me do this other thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Alcatraz was my second swim. Sorry, going back to your first. Yeah. Just ignored your question. Sorry about that. The Alcatraz was my second one. I did that this summer just gone.
Well, I should say
summer 2022, I did the Hellespont from Europe to Asia, and that was really amazing.
So these are proper kind of swim crossings across treacherous
conditions and waters,
tidal kind of surges. You don't want to get caught out at the wrong time with doing these crossings. You wouldn't want to do them without serious planning. They're not just like an open water swim in a lake. This is seaward conditions
for sure. And that summer 2022, when I did the Hellespont in Turkey, that was my first ever big swim. That was my first swimming event or things like that. And the risk and the pressure with that was it's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. And on Turkish National Victory Day, in honor of Lord Byron, the first person who ever did it 200 years ago, when he was 22, and I had this unique opportunity to do it at 22 as well. He did it on this day, and they only closed the shipping lanes for one day. I think only for a few hours actually every year. So it was very much like I had this one opportunity. And because I had that storyline behind, my goal, especially in these first few years, is to sort of to tip my hat to those who have led the path before me and those adventure greats. And, Lord Byron doing that first swim, I thought, God, how cool would it be if I could do this at 22 when he did it at 22 and that sort of full story. But if I failed or couldn't do it for whatever reasons, then obviously if I had to do it this year or next year, I wouldn't be 22 anymore. So it would take away that final tick. So that was pretty amazing. I remember getting the boat, they take you on a boat across to the start line so then you can swim back. And the boat took like 30 or 40 minutes. And I was like, I said to my house, we're joined by one of my best mates, Ben. I was like, if this is taking 30 or 40 minutes, how are we going to swim back in, I think we had goal times were like an hour or so. I think you had 2 hours maximum before then the boats start picking you up and sweeping you up, because then they need to open that shipping lane again. And we looked at each other and we were like, oh wow, okay, this is going to be tougher than we thought. And it was both our first swim, and somehow in just over an hour we both managed to finish, and we did it, and it was like the most peaceful hour of my life, because it was just so quiet, and we had the current helping us quite a bit, because I played quite a safe line. So I added like another 1.5 kilometers to my swim because I played that safer line, because I wanted to stay to the left and I wanted to make sure I did it. And
when you say safe line, what do you mean by this?
So say you've got an A to B line, is rather than swimming, you don't swim directly. Instead, you swim round, because the current's coming here. So you swim actually in this sort of arch. So what you're told is there's all these different key points you have to aim for, but actually you're sort of swimming like this the whole way, and then that sort of takes you round. So it's pretty strange actually, and sometimes you feel like I'm definitely going the wrong way. Like there's the finish line, and I'm right now heading for the football stadium, whatever. You have all these key points you're told to hit, right. And also the thing with it is they say, oh, well, when you get to this point, then you start turning for the next point. But the problem is you don't know when to turn, because you're not allowed to watch. So you're not allowed to know the distance. You're not allowed to know the time.
There's no buoys out there that you're swimming around.
There's boats, but they're just these Turkish guys just either cheering you on or not saying anything, and it's a strange thing. And, you have no idea. Basically, you spend the whole hour going, I'm doing this wrong. I have no idea what I'm doing or where I'm going. And you just hope and pray you're following these instructions right. But the problem as well is everyone goes in different directions, because everyone's got different backgrounds, different speeds. Everyone's got different ideas. Everyone shoots off in different directions. So you have really no idea. And me and Ben said at the start line, we were like, gave each other like fist bump, right, let's stick together. We lost each other within the first 30 seconds because his goggles fell off, I think. And I got kicked in the face by someone. It was just like the worst start. And we lost each other straight away. And it's so unpredictable. So then with this running project I've just finished, I had to have a break over summer because of like the timings of where I wanted to do it with, the weather zones, all these sort of things. I was like, right, I've got 3 months over summer because my long-term plan is to do a few more swims. Let's keep that experience going, keep that training. I'll do a swim in summer. And that's when I said, well, I'll do the Alcatraz. Again, it's a great name. It's a great story. That was more difficult actually than the Hellespont. The Hellespont was peaceful a little bit, even though it was unpredictable. The Alcatraz was just not fun. It's just not fun. And it's not the biggest swim. Some people have done so many bigger swims. You mentioned Sean Conway earlier, like what he's done is nothing, the Alcatraz is nothing compared to what he's done. But for me, for my second swim, it was quite tough. And I added to the challenge because I decided to not wear a wetsuit. So I was the only finisher on the day without a wetsuit. I think there were 70 swimmers or so. And so I put 6 kilos on in my training to deal with the cold. I'd done a lot of cold preparation and cryotherapy at the Body Lab, done a lot do cold water daily anyway, all these things. But that was so strange because there's moments where, you're looking again at these key points because again, you've got to follow the current. You can't aim directly for the finish. You've got to aim to the left a little bit, so this they've got all the building names. I can't remember them, but you've got to head for them. And again, you don't know when to start turning to the right. And there's moments where the waves were so high up, they were actually blocking the view of these buildings. So they come down, you could see them, they come back and you're trying to sight. So you're trying to look up and it's just like, you don't want to do it. And whereas running, you can stop and pause, wherever you are, you can stop, pause, right? Am I where I am? Okay. Swimming, you can't.
And you can, when with running, you can stop and pause and appreciate where you are, right?
That's a good point.
I always find these swims I've done a few long distance swims. I swam down the River Dart, the Dart 10K, one of the British kind of long distance swims you can do.
Wonderful.
Spent 3 months training for that. But it's an odd one because it's the most idyllic, probably outdoor swimming event in the UK. I highly recommend it. It's run by such a small little collective. It feels like a very big kind of warm community that put it on. But I remember swimming down it. It was mightily cold. It was 13 degrees, I think, which is cold. Anything sub kind of 16 degrees is that, you're kind of getting into territory where it gets cold. Colder than I trained for because we had a lot of fresh rainfall in September. But swimming down this river, you just feel like it's the most beautiful way to travel down the river, but most of the time your head's underwater.
Yeah.
And anytime you try and take it in, because you're so low down, you're not always and you got to keep yourself afloat. I find these kind of swimming journeys or swimming adventures very bizarre because you really have to have a certain mindset to kind of go into that place, knowing that you're going to be mostly staring into the abyss, chugging salt water, going up your nose. It's true. Trying to sight when waves are crashing over you. And you mentioned also with the group events when just people kicking you in the face.
Yeah, it's classic. Yeah. And the Hellespont I did mostly breaststroke actually, because Lord Byron did it breaststroke. So I was trying to honor him that way as well, which added other challenge because I was, a little bit slower. And it actually did the opposite thing where I wasn't looking down most, I was looking up most of the time, which then played on my mind of, am I really going the right way? So I was actually sighting maybe too much, someone told me afterwards. But I agree with you. Swimming is a totally different sort of animal to running. So
why
to swim?
Why do you do these swims?
There's something about the oceans and the water, and it really scares me. I think they're so intimidating. I think they're so unpredictable that I think there's this magic of adventure that lies there somewhere. Not saying I want to row. I've done that little English Channel. I haven't done a big ocean. I'm not sure I ever will. But there is something about swimming in the open ocean and the unpredictability that that running doesn't give you that maybe swimming can provide. It's also a lot more freedom, I think, associated with that swimming for those reasons. But it is scary. And something about it, I don't know whether that's a healthy thing or not, but it does sort of pull me in a little bit. And it's pretty amazing when you can do that. And when I finished the Alcatraz and I touched the sand at San Francisco Bay, I'd only been swimming for an hour or so, but it's like this huge moment of like safety and relief that with runs, especially like we said, with the confidence, the more runs you do, the more confident you get, that you don't feel always when you finish a marathon. Like I have no real feelings if I finish a run or a marathon, because I knew I was going to do it. I knew I could do it, and I went out and did it. Whereas the swims, it's like that uncertainty that I haven't experienced so much. It's quite similar to mountaineering, actually, in that sense. You rely a lot more on the weather and Mother Nature.
This brings an interesting point, I think, because typically the old school explorers were kind of going into terrain that they'd never been to before, and finding out along the way what was there, how to cross certain passages. And I think when you do an open water swim, especially in A to B and in seaward conditions, it's almost like you are treading this untrodden terrain, because you're crossing into this place where it's very unique to everyone who crosses it. So you feel like you are kind of becoming an explorer.
For sure.
Because it's going to be, the journey's going to be unique. The way you cross it is unique. But there's something about going, especially if you're on land and you can see a certain point you have to get to and get across to it. If you do that if you do a journey on land, you're just walking the same path that a lot of people have walked. So there's nothing special about that. Like by doing it in the water, you're creating this unique experience for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think especially now when we talk about social media and, the current, running is very popular, right? So with swimming, it's not quite as, that path's not quite as trodden. And I think there are a few more opportunities for pioneering things and world first and stuff like that, because it's so different in each swim each day, because the ocean is different every single day. It can really vary. And those moments where you're waiting for the timing of you get the ocean report. It's really scary, because I can do everything I can in my preparation, putting on the weight for the cold, doing all the cold water and all the swims. I know that's only half the work. Mother Nature has the ultimate hand. We can't beat her, but maybe we can survive her. And the swims are pretty unpredictable. And I've experienced that a little bit with some of my runs, some of these remote places, for sure. But the swims is their own beast.
You've spoken about how your grandfather was the biggest inspiration to the life that you have now made it a career. Tell me about your granddad, Captain Rick Taylor. You said he served in the army.
It's so awesome as well hearing you say his name, and his name's been mentioned a lot these last few months, so it's really amazing. I think every time it makes my mum cry, my nan cry, but it's really amazing to know that we're still mentioning his name, and we're now fighting for those other families affected by dementia, because that's what it's all about. My granddad was Captain Rick Taylor. He served in the British Army for 38 years, served all around the world, some of the most dangerous places, but he was his battle against dementia, which sadly took his life, and he was diagnosed at only 58. So really, really young. And that was shortly after his retirement from the army, and he was supposed to go off and live the life that he deserved, doing these adventures. He was an adventurer and explorer in his own right. He was a mountaineer. He was an abseiler. He did all these incredible things. He was a skier, but he was stripped of those opportunities from this, well, in my mind, one of the most devastating illnesses in the world. And he was diagnosed when he was 58, so I would have been 2 years old. So from 2 till 19, I just watched it all unfold. And, my memories of my granddad aren't memories of really positive things and amazing things, because my memories of my granddad are granddad forgetting how to drive, how to use a knife and fork, forgetting who I was, forgetting who my mum was, and then, forgetting who he was himself. That's who I remember, unfortunately, because he was diagnosed when he was so young and I was young as well. So, when he passed, it was a couple months after I got back from Kilimanjaro, and I had the huge honor, probably one of the greatest privileges of my life, and it always will be, being asked by my nan to deliver the eulogy at his funeral. And when when you're 19 and you've watched your granddad, live with this illness for 17 years, and it's destroyed not only him, but it's destroyed my whole family at that point. And anyone who's affected by dementia will know this. Don't know what to say. What do you say for a man who's given his life for his country, served 38 years, worked all the way up from a private to a captain? He's earned every step of that way. He didn't go straight in as an officer. He worked for it. He really sacrificed. He'd raised 2 amazing daughters. All these grandchildren. He was an amazing man. What do you say at a funeral for that? I was 19. I didn't know what to say. So I just made a promise, and that was to support this fight against dementia until the day we find a cure, to make sure that this doesn't happen to people in the future. That's the truth. I didn't know what to say that day. That's where I made this promise, and that promise has now in many ways defined my life. Promise to support this fight until the day we find a cure. And I think now we've raised over 40,000 or something for the charity, which is amazing, and we've done a lot for awareness, hopefully, as well. And obviously, most recently delivered this letter to number 10 a few days ago. But this promise is so important to me. It's when I talk about planning my adventures or dreaming my adventures, sometimes I look at the promise and work backwards, because that's what it's all about. It's
such a shame that all your memories of your grandfather are tainted by the illness that he had throughout his life. There is this, I don't know really what it's called, but I think there's this thing called the Grandparent Paradox.
Okay.
It's something that I've learned over time. When we're young, our grandparents are full of energy, and they give us so much love and time and create these incredible memories, but we're not able to remember them because we're so young. And it all happens at a time in our lives when we are unable to appreciate the time that we have with our grandparents because we're young, and we are yet to understand the fragilities of life and death. And I guess how precious the moments of time that we spend with our family are. And when we grow older, so do our grandparents, so do our family. And that unfortunately comes with the aging process of our grandparents generally becoming less mobile, having less energy to spend time with us, and in many cases, losing some cognitive function. And when we are finally able in our life to appreciate the time that we have with our grandparents, sometimes it's then too late. And it's a shame that we're not able to see that when we're kids, when we're young, because we just do not understand life yet. We do not understand that things do eventually come to an end. And our time with our grandparents is so incredibly precious. And if we're still lucky to have any in our lives, then we really should be doing more to spend time with them, because one day they won't be around.
Beautifully said. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. But I also think about all the people who do have time with their grandparents, but it's time which maybe they, is a lot more difficult because their grandparents may be ill with dementia or, whatever else, all these awful disease and things out there. And you think about that because, if we look at dementia, so many people are full-time carers for their grandparents, for their parents. And yeah, you think about all that time those people are putting in and the impact it's having on them as well. And unfortunately, then their memories with their grandparents, their loved ones, really difficult memories, aren't they? Because difficult disease.
What is the state of dementia in the UK right now?
Well, it's not good. 1 in 3 people in England with dementia are currently never diagnosed. So there's so many things with dementia which we need to fight for. And this is just one of them, but this is what I've been fighting for and campaigning for the last 14 months, which is dementia diagnostics. So currently 1 in 3 people in England with dementia are never formally diagnosed. It's not good enough. It's devastating. And it means 2 things. It means right now, lots of people aren't getting the care they deserve. And I've had a lot of comments and messages recently of people telling me their stories about how their grandparent or their parent can't get access to proper care they need. They need professional care, right? because they've not been officially diagnosed. And it's that thing of, if it's not on paper and it's not a full diagnosis from your doctor, whoever, you can't get access to the care. And also really scary, it means when these drugs do become available and these treatments become available, which we're hearing could be 1 to 2 years away. The 2 drugs have been approved in America in the last 12 months, which is really good news. It's not the cure for dementia for everyone, but for certain types of dementia, they found it's starting to succeed. Those are going to become available in the UK quite soon. So on the horizon, but if people aren't officially diagnosed, they can't get the treatment. So it's all these issues going on right now.
You mentioned about diagnostics. What can we use to diagnose dementia?
Well, I think the best thing is brain scans. Again, I say this, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a researcher, I'm not a doctor. And that's why I try and use the adventures to do my part and to use them as a platform to hopefully raise this awareness and these donations. But I know brain scans is, I think, one of the best ones. But another one which is a lot more cost effective and accessible is these lumbar punctures. And over the last, I published an open letter to the Prime Minister in September addressing dementia diagnostics. And I was given a number by Alzheimer's Research UK, who put together their annual sort of report. And they found that £16 million would increase these lumbar puncture tests from 2,000 a year to 20,000. That's 1,000% increase. That's absolutely huge. Again, we need much more than 20,000, but this is just what we're starting with. This is the first increase we're looking for.
What exactly is the lumbar puncture? What is it doing?
I think you're taking a little bit of fluid from your, again, I'm not an expert, but you're taking some fluid from someone's back, and then they're using that back to find the right sort of, whatever it might be, when they...
a genetic test of some sort?
Yeah, genetic test, yeah. Because obviously I think the original, when you first diagnose dementia, the first thing you go and do is you do these sort of cognitive tests and things like that, and memory tests and things like that, but I think they found to be quite flawed, and you need to have like an official thing where they officially check, whatever it may be, your blood or whatever it may be. But they're diagnosing, or they're improving their ways of diagnostics as well at the moment, which is amazing, because we need to diagnose more and more people. Because the more people who we do diagnose who are already living with dementia, then we can hopefully get more and more funding from the government for this. Because 1 in 3 people aren't diagnosed. That's incredible. That's so sad. And it means if we've got, they say, around 1 million people in the UK currently with dementia, really it's probably 1.5 million. So that's a huge difference when we're talking about annual reports and things from the government.
The numbers actually are really scary because dementia has been, it seems like the numbers have been on the rise for the past 15, 20 years. And it seems that predicting what's going to happen with an aging population in the future, that this is going to be a really serious talking point for the future of our generation going forward, scares me. And I've been on a journey to try and find out what things I can be doing now in my life that might minimize the risk of having dementia in the future. A lot of things are quite uncertain because we don't quite fully understand it yet, but it definitely seems like this is going to be a big talking point for the future of us.
100%. I mean, it already is. It's the biggest killer in the UK. 1 in 4 hospital beds are currently occupied by a dementia patient. So it's already having horrendous effects for the NHS and for so many people. And then, if you think about the future, unfortunately, at this rate, it's just going to get worse and worse. And I think they say by 2030, is that 1 in 2 people will be affected. So that's why we need to do more. And that's why we need to act on it. And I just hope and pray that what we've done with this running project most recently can maybe have a small impact towards, in this case, diagnostics. And plans are already underway of what I can do next to hopefully, look after and raise awareness for the next thing. Because there's so many different parts of it, like the diagnostics, the research, the current care that people need. It's this huge field of we need to do as much as we can. And it's not perfect right now, that's for sure. But we can do more. And there's myself and there's so many people who are doing amazing things to do this. And, I think about those actual researchers, the actual nurses, the people who are day to day dealing with this, they know the real impact. And I've been very lucky and privileged to meet many of them, going back to my granddad's care home. And when I did the 17 days meeting all these researchers every day, they'd come around and they'd chat to me for 5 minutes and they'd tell me about what they're currently working on and that they just got a grant from the charity to do this new type of research. And it was amazing. But you realize how many people, not just in the UK, but worldwide, are working on this. It's devastating. Really devastating.
Oh, it's fabulous that you're doing something that's raising awareness, that's getting people talking, that's connecting people, that's fundraising as well. So the one thing you've just mentioned, your most recent challenge is your 7 marathons on 7 continents. Only a few hundred people in history have ever done a marathon on all 7 continents. And you just recently, last month, completed that journey.
I think got home about 3 weeks ago from Antarctica. And it's been quite a strange 3 weeks since getting home. I'm really happy to be speaking to you because this is my first time talking about it since not only getting home from Antarctica, but also delivering my open letter to 10 Downing Street, which was just 2 days ago. So the project is officially over. It took me 14 months.
So this is different to like your 17 and 17 days. You've now had different a span of time in between each marathon because you've had to travel to different areas of the globe. And what I found very interesting, you chose very remote places to do these marathons. It wasn't just going to a city and doing a marathon there. These were very specific places.
For sure. I mean, I don't do anything half-hearted. And when I worked backwards of, this is what I'm going to do again. And I said, this, of course, is a global cause. What can I do? And I said, I need a global challenge. Well, and I found about the 7 marathons, 7 continents. A few people have done it, but no one's done it in really remote places. And I thought, right, I'm going to do a little bit of a twist on this. There's some people who do it in 7 days, incredible, amazing, but they often just see the airports and things like, no, I actually want to go to these places. I want to talk to the people. So in the end, over 14 months, I ran through 2 deserts, Alaska, the Australian outback, the Amazon rainforest, the Arctic Circle, and then finally Antarctica last month. So I went to some of the most remote places on Earth. I had the greatest privilege to see some of the best wildlife, to meet some of the most remote and incredible communities and see some of the best environments in the world, right? And also be challenged in some quite harsh conditions. I got stuck in a rainstorm in the rainforest, incredible heat and humidity in the desert. And then obviously most recently Antarctica, we had like minus 25 degrees with wind chill, and the snow was just horrendous. When it was so fine, never experienced anything like it. And it got picked up by the wind and it was sharp. It felt like sand, not like snow, and hitting me from the side. So I've been challenged in some conditions, but these challenges are nothing compared to what I've been running for, which was to raise this money. And we raised £10,000 for Alzheimer's Research UK. And we also delivered an open letter to the Prime Minister at 10 Downing Street just a few days ago. So it's strange looking back because, it's only just finished 2 days ago, this whole project. And it took 14 months. 14 months, all I thought about every day was this project. I woke up and thought about this. This was my key, my focus. Very lucky through my sponsors to be able to work on this full time. But it's all over.
So we were talking earlier about having range. And what you've done in this project is challenge yourself in completely contrasting environments to do these runs. You talked about deserts. You've ran in cold conditions. You've run in humid conditions. You've run in dry conditions, whether that's hot or cold, dry conditions. The first one was this in Morocco? I've got this one.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. This is which desert was this?
This was the Agafe Desert.
Agafe Desert
in Northern Africa. That was again, talk about initiations. That was a tough one. That was close to 40 degrees, really humid. I got chased by a pack of wild dogs about 14 kilometers in. That was a tough start to the whole project. It really was. I climbed Toubkal, the tallest mountain in Northern Africa, like 2 days before. So my legs were still a little bit fatigued. It was a tough start to the whole project. And it was a good lesson of how tough and serious I need to take this before going into the next 6.
How were your marathon splits when you were being chased by the dog?
It's quite funny actually, because they jump up and my heart rate definitely jumps up too. That was a strange moment. I'd read a lot about stories about these explorers being chased by animals and dogs. And I always thought, they were selling the book or, they were promoting the film. Turns out when it happens, it's pretty serious. And 14 kilometers in, I was totally, I had a support crew, had Mohammed and Rashid, and I had a friend, Chris, who would join me too. And they were in this Land Rover I told them to go like a few hundred yards ahead because I said I wanted to be as alone and isolated as I can in this desert. Again, another mistake. Make so many mistakes on my adventures, and that was just one of them. And I was running, and all I could really hear was, my own footsteps and my own breathing. And then slowly and suddenly, like I could hear other footsteps, and they got closer and closer. And as I turned around, I saw like a dozen of these wild dogs chasing me. And it sounds ridiculous. It was ridiculous. And it was a pretty tough start to the project.
Yeah, any wild dog in any foreign country, you worry about what diseases they could be carrying, right? And that's
100%. And I had I was saved by my support crew that day. They jumped out Mohammed Rashid, the vehicle. They told me, run around the vehicle, and I did, and somehow managed to get through. And they started to swerve the vehicle and to scare off the dogs. Didn't hit them, just to scare them off. And I had some really serious conversations when I came home with people who had like medical backgrounds, and they were like, first of all, did you have a doctor there with you who was rabies, had all the rabies vaccines and things like that? I was like, no. Okay. Well, when you saw the dogs, did you jump straight into the vehicle? No. Okay. What are you doing? And I was like, it's just naivety. I saw these dogs. I was like, okay, I can outrun these dogs. And, and I started to run around the vehicle and managed to get away with it. But it was just really, really big naivety on my part. I knew if I touched the vehicle, got into the vehicle, in my mind, the marathon would be over and I'd have to start again. So that's why I didn't get into the car. And I would have, had to gone back to 0 kilometers. And I was 14 kilometers in. I was already struggling. It was already hot, humid, just after sunrise. So that's why I didn't touch the car.
Oh, that's interesting. So what was it about touching that car that would zero that challenge for you?
I'm not sure, truthfully. I just thought if I got into a moving, because obviously I imagine if I got into the car, they would have had to drive to get away from the dogs too. Because what I got told afterwards is these dogs, right? They're wild dogs, so the whole desert is their home. So what you need to do is just get away from wherever their little bit of land is, which is why as we start to run away from them, they left us. So I thought, God, if I get straight into the vehicle, Mohammed Rashid, they're going to drive us away. So that's why I didn't get into the car. It was maybe that ego of adventure. Sometimes when you're running in a desert, you think, I'm invincible, I'm this, that. You're not. We're really not. Mother Nature, wildlife is far stronger than us. So I just had it in my head that I can't get into the car, and I thought I could outrun them, and somehow I did. But I was very, very lucky to get through that, and then went to another desert a month later.
This was in Jordan.
This was in Jordan. This was the Wadi Rum.
So when you say desert, these two deserts, were they very similar because deserts come in different forms, right? So what was the difference between these two deserts?
You're very right. They were totally different. The Agafe Desert, the ground was like hard rock. It was almost, it was like dried out. There was no sand. And then the Wadi Rum was sand. It was like running on, a beach on holiday. It was really, really difficult.
I mean, any runner that listens to this knows that running on sand is not fun.
Yeah.
Just so much of your energy just goes into the ground.
Yeah. You spending the whole time sliding over and slipping over. Like you think about the glamours of running a marathon in a desert. I just spent the whole time slipping and sliding over and falling over because it's really difficult, or stopping every 10 minutes to empty your shoes because no things work really to stop sand getting in. When you're in a desert, and sand goes everywhere. So that was really, really hard to get any momentum going. It wasn't quite as hot and it wasn't quite as humid. And although we had some wildlife briefings and concerns, that we didn't see any because we were running quite near to the mountains, so we had risks of wolves and some scorpions and snakes, but luckily didn't see any. And to be honest, after about 5 minutes of running in the sand, I forgot about everything, all the risks, because I was so concerned about actually being able to get going. I was so tired. So it's that naivety again, if you forget where you really are.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think we've forgotten to really mention is just how difficult it is to run a marathon. Full stop. Regardless of the fact that you've traveled somewhere in this completely remote place with really bizarre terrain and conditions that aren't ideal. So, what is, you talked about you not being a runner, and you've challenged yourself to do some more marathons. What's going through your head when you're just in this random place trying to even get through a marathon? Because that's a hard thing itself.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think in the sense of this project, 95% of the work was actually before I even got to said location, because of all the logistics and picking a support crew and all these sort of things when I've never even been to a desert, and how I've got to find the right support crew and the sponsorship and the press and all these different things. So by the time I got to that marathon, sometimes I was like, right, this is actually my moment. Now I can enjoy this for the next 5, 6, 7 hours. These weren't fast marathons, but they were really slow. These were challenges of distance, not time for me. Because while I'm out there, I'm still got to be in charge of my support crew, whoever I'm with. So I needed to be aware and stop when you see things. When I was in Alaska, which was the one after, we saw a brown bear come out of hibernation. So I just stopped for 10 minutes So although wildlife has been a challenge of the project, it was also a highlight. But I often, when I'm actually running, I just thought, right, this is it. This is what I've been dreaming about for whatever it might be, a few months. This is the moment to now enjoy it, because before you know it, those 6 hours, they go so quick. And you're a better runner than me. Actually, when you get into the flow of things, that run is over before you know it. So I just thought to try and enjoy it as much as you can. Because time passes, right? And a marathon, of course, it's tough, and the distance is tough. The amount of time you're spending, 5 hours moving, high heart rate, of course, it's tough, but it passes. It passes.
Yeah. And you wanted to enjoy it.
I wanted to. This is the greatest
unique opportunity, right? Where you were.
For sure, and that's why I didn't listen to any music, for example, or anything. Like, people always ask, like, what music just do? I didn't listen to any. I'm not a runner who looks down at my watches. I'm not inspired or motivated by times or running shoes. I'm not interested in that sort of stuff. I run to explore, and in this sense, it was to look up and look around me and go, oh my gosh, I'm in a wildlife conservation in Alaska, or I'm in the Amazon rainforest. Like, how lucky and privileged am I to be able to go to these places, let alone stay sometimes with these communities. Stayed with the Bedouins in the desert, stayed on the indigenous Quechua community land of the Amazon. So lucky. So I think being able to just pause and go, this is it. That's enjoy, like I said, enjoy it. That's all the motivation I need when I'm running. Still makes it, of course, it's still tough, but it's when you've got that motivation, it makes it a lot easier in my mind.
You've said you've connected with a lot of the communities, and you've chosen some wildlife conservation areas to run in.
Sure.
What did you learn from the people on the ground in all these different places? Are there any stories you can tell about anything?
Well, it's funny, actually. I think the Amazon really sticks out to me for that reason, because they didn't know what running really was. They definitely didn't know what a marathon was, but actually they didn't really know what running was, because they don't have this community I was running with. They're called the Quechua community. They're about 250 people in this sort of tribe, and running and exercise wasn't part of their daily thought, because they're constantly working on their land. They're walking to their school is hours away, all these different things. So when they saw some ginger kid rock up, and I had one of my good mates Max with me too, and we had that little support crew, they were like, who is this guy? And then it's funny, instead of going, oh, we're scared or we're gonna stay away from him, they did the opposite. And I had some people join me and run. I had this lady join me. She was in like this sort of red dress, and she had flip-flops on, sort of thing, and she just rocked up and she did like 14 kilometers with us, just non-stop, and we couldn't keep up with her. She was so fast, couldn't keep up with her. We were like, how's she going to run? And she just took her flip-flops off and just ran barefooted, holding her flip-flops. She was just amazing. And I don't know if she's ever ran before or not, but because she was adapted to the humidity and the land and things like that a little bit more than us, that we just couldn't keep up. She was amazing. And I had a female people join me that day, and I had a translator too who was explaining why I was actually there. And it was funny, we talk about what I learned from them is, well, they didn't actually know what dementia was. They knew the symptoms of dementia, but they didn't know actually it had a name, and it was a thing which was worldwide. So for me, on a personal note, going to these remote places just highlighted that dementia is in every corner of the world. And although we're always talking about a cure, some people don't even know it's an illness in the first place. So we're not just fighting really anymore for the UK, we're fighting for the world when it comes to dementia. And I think our country, is one of the, leading health sort of countries. We need to really lead this fight. But I learned an awful lot from all these people. It was such a privilege, such a privilege. And what I did learn is that adventure is also in every corner of the world. In the Arctic as well, a couple of months ago, those guys were amazing. I had an amazing crew from a company called Chasing Lights, and they just loved it. They just loved why I was there. They were like, why are you here? And they just couldn't work it out. And I explained what I was doing, and they were just so supportive, and they just loved it. And I'm sure you've experienced on your adventures, like it just translates into any different religion or country or community or race or background. It's this wonderful thing, adventure. And it's also so personal and it's so unique, right? There's no right way of doing adventure. There's no wrong way of doing it. It's all unique to however we perceive it. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, there's something about when someone says they're going to do something that draws people to want to experience it with them, whether that's following them on social media or just being present to kind of run with you or walk with you or whatever you're doing, just to be beside you. And I heard you mention that when you were training for Mont Blanc, you went up Penny Farm 10 times, and you put this out on social media, and you had a handful of people come and join you.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
A previous podcast.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I think it surprised your dad, because I think maybe was he in the corporate world and was like, oh, this is crazy that people would want to physically come out and travel to come and spend time with a stranger because they're just doing something quite bizarre.
My dad, he couldn't understand it. He when I put out, and that was when it was still a hobby at that time, and I was applying to other different jobs, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do something, because again, without meaning to, I'd been very kindly made an ambassador for Walking with the Wounded, because I'd done some stuff for them and raised some money. And I was like, okay, again, working backwards, right, what could I do for them? Well, Penny Fan has a huge attachment to the military, especially the special forces, all these incredible veterans. Okay, let's work backwards. What can I do on that? Okay. Some people have done it 10 times. Okay, maybe I could look at this. How can I add my own twist? I was like, well, no one's ever done it from what I could see with this sort of weighted vest on. Okay, well, then the weighted vest could represent the trauma and the troubles that these incredible veterans, return home with, as a result of their sacrifice for our country. So I was like, okay, I'll do this. And I put it on social media. And again, this was when it was hobby. I only had I thought my mum and dad and a few friends watching me, but it turned out to be a few more people. And I had like 5 people rock up, and they were like, oh, we're here to support you. I was like, really? Okay, amazing. And I had one guy, Jake, he just summited Everest. I was like, why isn't Everest summiteer? He's here to support me. He ended up doing like 6 with me. Like we stayed together like for 10 hours, and we go up and down this mountain. Had this incredible lady, George, who's actually currently she's walking to the South Pole right now as we speak. She stayed with me through the night and went straight to her shift as a firefighter. And my dad and my mum, they were blessed, and they were sat in the car park, support crewing us all. And they were like, this is real, isn't it? I was like, I think it is. And they were like, how do you know these people? I don't. I think it was a LinkedIn post or something I put up, and they were like, wow. And that's when those few months later, when I thought, maybe I can make this a full-time thing. They were like, maybe you can, because it's pretty amazing. If you've done that just in the first few months when it's a hobby, what's possible when, you put everything into it. And I'm definitely a person who puts 100% focus and energy into things. And sure, that's got disadvantages, because sometimes you've not got time for other things as well. And you make sacrifices, but it's pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's very special. I wonder if it's because sometimes it just takes a bit of leadership to kind of go and do these crazy things. So many of us want to be adventurous and want to do adventurous things in the weekends, but for whatever reason, we just can't quite put a pin on what we want to do, maybe, or when we do it. But when we see that someone is saying, hey, I'm doing this on this day,
right,
anyone want to come and join? It's like, great, perfect. That's everything I needed in my life to do my adventure. I just needed someone to organize it for me.
Okay. And
I think sometimes it's the motivation to do something that is sometimes slips away, because so many people want to do so many. I've got so many bucket lists like bike rides that I've just not done, and it's just because I just haven't put a date in the diary for me to do it. Mm-hmm. But if a friend said, hey, in this week in the summer, I want to go and cycle the North Coast 500, I would say yes immediately, and then it'd be in my diary, and I would do everything I could to make sure that I attended that. Why aren't I doing that myself right now? That's quite in terms of the mentality of doing an adventure, it's such an interesting point as how we can motivate ourselves to actually commit to doing something. And one of the things I find so inspiring about yourself is that you, from the very start, committed to doing Kilimanjaro, and you did it, and it didn't let it linger for years. It was just something that you went and did. And this brings around this, so many people listen to this, want to be doing adventurous things, but probably feel my summer last year was so unadventurous because of various things. And I just didn't commit to doing something. So what does it take to...
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it truthfully like that. I guess I'm very lucky in that way then. That I think first of all, just to caveat all, I think being able to do this full time makes it 10 times easier in terms of being able to commit, because I don't have the commitments to other work and things like that. But I suppose that leap taking thing, I can't quite pinpoint that right now. I know what you mean. Taking that leap sometimes is the hardest part, and I actually think sometimes getting to that start line is sometimes the hardest part too. And I felt that too actually on some adventures, and I think I'm in that phase a little bit now actually, because although, I've only been home 3 weeks, and, I'm still definitely, enjoying what we've done, and we've still got to talk about it. And I've got, another TV thing this weekend and things and opportunities to talk to yourself, like today. I am already in that planning and dreaming phase for what's next. And I'm about to be in that position where I've got to take that leap and commit. And I'm not too sure, actually. It's an interesting one. I wish I could give you a really good answer. I'm sorry, Tom.
What's unique
I
with
wish
you
I could.
is that because now you own this now as a career, so there is this kind of gentle pressure on you you have to do these things in order to receive sponsorship, and you can't just sit at home and dream of adventures. You've got to be going out and doing them.
For sure. And the dreaming part I find really, really fun. And in fact, I find that maybe the only natural phase of everything I do is that dreaming part, because I've got so many ideas and I really enjoy the creativity of being able to go, right, I can do whatever I want. Okay, what do I actually want to do? And the more I have done, again, I've not done a lot, but in these first few years, and especially finishing, Antarctica recently, the marathon there, I thought it gives you that confidence that you can really go out and chase these adventures and do or whatever you want to do. And that's it's a little bit dangerous thing, because firstly, it makes you feel like you're invincible again and anything's possible, which is amazing. But there's challenges to that, and you've got to remember to switch back into real life when you get home. But it also gives you this just incredible sense of freedom and opportunity that I've never experienced, before I started these adventures. So yeah, I wish I could give you a good answer for that, for the leap phase, and advice for that, because I know people do struggle with it, and I've experienced that with friends who have joined me on my adventures. My friend Max joined me in the Amazon, and he said he might not have done that if it wasn't for the opportunity. And we talked about the actual 7 locations. 5 of them were self-organized. The Antarctica I couldn't do self-organized. I had to book onto the race, and the one in the Wadi realm I did because Nick Butter, one of my mentors, was leading it. But the other 5 I self-organized, so that all of those started with an email. So if we talk about the first leap I actually made, it wasn't booking the flight, it wasn't taking the first step of the marathon, it was sending an email to, "Hi, I'm about to do this, will you help me?" And I sent, if we talk about the Outback, I sent an email to I think he was one of the mayors of this Outback town, and he was like, "Hi mate, there's only one marathon man here," and he sent me his name and his email, and I emailed this guy called Grant, and he straight away said yes. He was like, "Yeah, I've done 95 marathons or something. I'll support you through the day." I was like, wow. And before you know it, I was committed. I was like, this guy's willing to help me. I don't know why he's willing to help me, apart from just the kindness of his heart, the spirit of adventure. And then, the flights happen, the sponsor, everything else, takes place. But the first leap was often an email.
Yeah. So which one of the 7 marathons was the hardest?
The hardest were the deserts, that's for sure. And I would actually say the first and the last marathon were the toughest. Obviously, Antarctica is the biggest desert in the world. I think they had the highest contrast. Contrast was a big theme of this whole project. The wildlife, the weather, the people. That start, as I mentioned, in the desert in Africa, the wildlife, the high humidity, the heat. As a redhead, it's tough. But Antarctica was particularly unpredictable. It was particularly intimidating. It was a landscape I'd never sort of experienced before, and it was quite hard to prepare for in that sense. And it definitely was the most fearful I've ever been during a marathon. And we talk about that experience and that confidence from previous marathons. I didn't actually feel that as much in Antarctica, because it wasn't a challenge of running. It became a challenge of almost survival. And there were moments where the landscape, there was 68 runners from 28 different countries that day. And, we were all running, and it's this big, 10.5 kilometer loop, and this incredible support crew, they radar gun the whole route. So they have to check for crevasses everywhere. And they warned us these red flags here, don't go past these red flags, because this is where crevasses are. And there's moments where I was running, and then the wind picked up and it carried the snow, and I lost sight of all these little red flags, and these red flags were this big. And I lost sight of them, and I actually paused for 2 minutes, because I just thought, I can't see one. Have I gone off route, or where am I? And these crevasses are, they're 100 meters deep potentially. They're so scary. And I had to wait just for 2 minutes. Okay, the snow and the wind just dropped down a little bit. I can see one red flag. Okay, and I'm still en route, and you carry on. But it's that moment of you completely forget you're running a marathon. You completely forget you're there for a running challenge in general. You're I need to survive here. And again, it's nothing compared to what some polar explorers have done out there. And we had a full support crew, but for my first time there, it was quite scary, for me at least. And there are moments too where the snow is so bright because of the sun that you can't really always see people ahead of you, and you can't always see the base camp and things like that, so you lose sight of things. And you've also obviously got all these goggles on, and your balaclava, and your whole face is
you must
covered.
be the most dressed for any marathon that you've run, right? For that Antarctic one,
definitely. They give
you in trousers.
I was in base layers, bottoms and top, and I had running trousers on, which I never worn running trousers before. Even in the Arctic, and Alaska, I wore shorts, which some people laughed at. And then you had I had a polo on, and I had like a running sort of storm jacket, and then you have like balaclava, 2 gloves. Yeah, you've got a lot of layers.
That's insane.
But they give you they give you the strangest advice ever for a marathon, and they're like, okay, go out and run, but don't sweat. That's the advice you give them, right? It's a strange thing. And everyone looks around like, don't sweat. What? We're here to run a marathon. And they're like, yeah, you're not allowed to sweat. And you've got this really serious doctor who gives you this briefing. And he's like, yeah, if you sweat, your clothes can freeze pretty instantly. And that can lead to frostbite and frost. I mean, as he's talking, he's got photos up of previous frostbite examples, and everyone's face, they're getting really, their eyes are opening. And then he gives examples of snow blindness. And if you have your glasses off for, 10, 20 minutes, you can go snow blind. So all these risks of what you can't do. And actually more of it was about, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And it's pretty strange. And when we get to these little stations where they had drinks and some food, and all the Lucozade or whatever it was all hot, which is really strange. And then you're given a cup of Lucozade, and then you're given a handful of snow. And what you're supposed to do is use that snow and put it into your drink so you can actually drink it, because they can't keep the liquids there cold because they'd freeze. So when you're running, you're reminded, actually, okay, this is serious. You've got to be careful. And I had to change my base layers twice whilst I was running, because I started to sweat a little bit. So in the end, I took the jacket off and I was just base layer and polo, whilst also having a balaclava and gloves. So it's really strange, really, really strange. I mean, I'm sure lots of people are experiencing it now a little bit, with running outside and being cold and things. But
I mean, it's a different cold. What you experience. I mean, I've been for 2 runs the last 2 days when it's been hovering just above 0, and with 3 layers, as long as I'm moving, I can keep warm.
Yeah, and I think the big thing, the cold is tough, but when you combine it with really strong sun, that's what makes you sweat. It's not actually you moving, because you moving in the cold is fine, but it's the sun. It's unbearable. So I had some frostburn when I came home, and some people laughed at that, because I think 12 hours after coming home, I did a few TV things, and I looked like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. One of my best mates, Connor, he sent me a voice note singing Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Thanks, mate. But the sun, the snow, the conditions, and then you're obviously finishing, and then you're going back into this tent, which is like a sauna, and then you've still got to fly then back to Chile, and then you've got 3 more flights back to London. So it's like you're not finishing a marathon and you're done and you can celebrate. It's like, no, we're here, we've now got to get back safely. That's half of it. And there's also the risk that you could get delayed. There's previous years they've been stuck out there for 2 weeks because the plane can't stay on the snow, it's called the blue ice runway at Union Glacier, and it lands, and within 10 minutes you board and it takes back off. So it's not allowed to stay
stationary.
On the ice.
It freezes. Basically.
I don't know what the reason. I think it's more to do with about the weight on the ice or something like that, in case there's crevasses and stuff like that. I think there's some issues with there, but yeah, it lands. You literally board straight away. There's no security or this, that. You just get straight on, fly straight out. And it's the weirdest experience, because before you know it, 5 hours later, you're back in Chile and you're in this town called Punta Arenas. And it's like, there's a hotel and there's, restaurants, and you're like, this is all done. It's over. And 67 hours was like this.
One does not simply fly to Antarctica. There's many stages to that. And it's first of all getting to mainland. On a different continent, because I guess you're just waiting for the weather window that the plane can land and pick you up again.
It's the only time the only time in my life I've ever been given a boarding pass and it didn't have a date or time on it. So they said, this is the flight number, IC, blah, 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 whatever. This is it. This is your boarding pass. It's got your name on it, but it doesn't have a date or time. So it could be the next few days. It could be tonight. You don't know when it is. Then you get the email, we're flying tomorrow at 7 a.m. But then you get to the airport and we were boarding the plane, and then someone turned around like, nope, get off. So we had to go back out for 2 hours because suddenly the wind changed. And you're constantly reminded about actually how scary and how, dangerous this could be. And that's something I learned on a lot of my adventures. You never take any of this for granted. And I've been very lucky to scrape through some things. But it's now why I'm trying to implement more and more support teams and safety crew, because if I've been lucky to get through this at 24 and I want to dream of doing this for the next 30, 40, 50 years and pioneering some of the greatest adventures, I need to take this really seriously.
Did you see much from the plane whilst you flew over the continent of Antarctica?
Yeah.
That must be special.
Most amazing flight ever. It's incredible. There's nothing. It's just these like snow-peaked mountains. and it's just amazing, really amazing.
Yeah. In between these marathons, you've got to come back to London and you've got to prepare for the next one. You said you've kind of self-organized so many of these locations, but also you're going from one extreme to another. We talked about this early on about going from, even just from the northern hemisphere, Arctic Circle to Antarctic, having from like hardly any daylight to full daylight. But you're going from these dry conditions where it's hot, where it's humid, back into like icy conditions again. So what are you doing in these interim kind of period of time to prepare yourself for the next one?
That's a great question, because I think between the Arctic and the Amazon, I had two weeks, maybe just over 2.5 weeks. There's not a lot of time. You can't come home and do a full training camp. You can't do a full climatization at a heat chamber or whatever it might be. It's just about doing the best you can. And actually it's about all that preparation before. So my training's changed, and I don't train now to be the fastest or the fittest, or to none of my goals are ever aesthetic. I don't train for a six-pack or anything like that. My goals are all about being as injury resistant as possible. So I work with my coach Jake at the Body Lab. He's my strength and conditioning coach, so all his plans are to do with strengthening all those little muscles and joints and everything in the legs. It's all about being preventative. So people think that some of my training is like, doing really loads of long runs or glamorous weight training. It's not. It's sometimes we're balancing, bands and weights on my ankles and doing all these random things and lots of stability work. And then it's also about all the recovery. And actually, I try to put in every hour I put into training, I try and put into my recovery. So at my peak of training camp, that'll be 10 hours of both. So during the recovery, that'll be like red light therapy, cryotherapy, hyperoxygen chamber, compression therapy, doing all these things I can to sort of make sure I get to that start line as healthy and fresh as possible. That's the biggest goal, because so often, and I think it was Brian Wood actually gave me this really good advice ahead of the 17 days. He was like, don't peak too much in your training to the point where you get to that start line and you've already got small issues or small things. It's about going in sometimes as healthy and fit and a little bit reserved as possible, where you're preventing issues, because that's the big thing. As with your running, it's, getting to that start line, you need to be in a good position, because otherwise things go wrong very, very early, and that's when you give yourself a difficult time.
What I liked about this particular challenge is because it wasn't kind of every day, challenge. It was just preparing yourself for this one big event that you said you built up, trying to make yourself injury resistant, so that when you arrived at this location, you could, one, enjoy it, and two, it was almost like a victory lap. You said this to me the other day, that it's just like, I've done all the hard work, and now I can finally enjoy and all this time that I put in. For sure.
I mean, I think it's quite, I don't know what word, but maybe it's a little bit easy, when things start to grow and suddenly there's more people involved and you've got a team. I've got a team everywhere I go on the location, but also at home now. And it's easy to forget, hang on, why did I actually start this? Well, I started this because from my granddad, and then from Kilimanjaro, what did it give me? Well, it gave me my passion and purpose. It gave me this gift. Okay, let's remember why I actually started this. Well, I love it. I really enjoy it. And going out to these places, Antarctica, the Arctic, it's just amazing. And being able to stop and look around and just enjoy it. You're not always arriving in some of the freshest conditions, because, say the Amazon, you got 3 or 4 flights. We then had like 100-kilometer boat journey. And it's not a good boat journey. It's like horrendous. The water's hitting you, and you can't drive in a straight line because you've got all these sand bays sort of things. So he's driving constantly around. Then you get into a kayak and then another canoe, and it's like by the time you get to the start line, it's not like rocking up.
You've already had the adventure to get there, yeah.
You have. So you're trying to enjoy that, but you're also being wary of, right, don't get injured, don't do this, because you're very wary. And the same with this project. I didn't have any sort of moments of celebration or relief, because I knew, okay, I've done one. This is a 7 marathon project. I've got another one to go on to. So there was no moment of like switch off or celebrate or go out and whatever, because I knew, especially the final 3, I did the final 3 in about 2.5 months. I did the Amazon in October, the Arctic November, then Antarctica in December. So it was like a bigger picture thing, as we spoke about. But yeah, the marathon is the victory lap. You're right. But it's a tough victory lap.
Okay. I've got a big question for you now.
Okay, here we go.
And it's not to try and challenge you, it's to open this up to debate.
Sure.
What place does a explorer have in the year 2024 with climate change being such a big issue in our lives?
It's a very important question. Actually, it's something I'm thinking about a lot this year. The truth is I've not got the perfect answer for it. But I think it's so important. And because I've only been in this very, very short period, I find lots of my answers in when I've spoke to people who are far more experienced at things. And, I speak to explorers who, someone like Robert Swan, for example, and he's shared his experiences with, Antarctica and how it's changed over the 30 years he's been going there. It's devastating. And I've been very, very lucky just to witness a little bit of the beauty that this world has. I'm really a little bit concerned about how things could change for generations below. And, as I said, I'm always trying to honor and tip my hat to those adventures above me, but I'm also wary and concerned about the generations below me. And I don't know the perfect answer. I know I can definitely do more myself. I think many of us can, to highlight this, because you're right, it's so important. And I need to speak to some real professionals and experts on it. And actually it's going to be already something that I'm going to be talking about a lot more with my next challenge, as one of the causes I want to highlight.
Because
what's your thoughts?
Well, you read about these amazing explorers over the last kind of century or so that have just gone off and done these incredible things, finding about all these remote places, far-flung places all over the world. And I myself have done a fair bit of global travel, but not so much in the last 5 years. I haven't flown in nearly 5 years since pre-COVID. And I'm more self-aware now of my own climate, of my own carbon footprint, and the impact that I have, and the purpose behind travel. Okay, I'm not saying that you can't fly and you can't travel, but I feel like I've definitely now started to question what purpose there is behind it, and the purpose behind my meaning and the meaning for it. And I know that there's a few other kind of adventure type explorers or athletes who are changing their ways. Alistair Humphreys is a great British adventurer who himself says that he's just given up flying. Whether that's a long-term thing or not at the moment, just hasn't. I think Kilian Jornet, one of the ultra runners, really now chooses events wisely, doesn't kind of fly all over the world for these events. Same with Damien Hall, another great British ultra runner. And it's just, there seems to be, I guess with the older generation who probably have done their fair bit of travel, and perhaps they've got families anyway, so there's probably different circumstances, are changing the way that they kind of live their lives. And it's just an interesting point to I guess there could be people who are out there say, okay, you've done 7 marathons in 7 different continents, but at what cost and what purpose? Because you've done 7 long haul flights to kind of go around, or 6 long haul flights. I guess.
No, you're right. Yeah, it's an important thing to talk about, and it's an important thing to think about. And I hope I can be more wise and as I grow older and get better advice and things. And someone like Lewis Pugh, I really love, and the stuff he's done for climate change and swimming in these really important places, because you hope that the challenge and what you're doing can have a greater benefit than the cost, right? That's the ultimate thing. And the money that my sponsors, for example, put into this 7 continents project, the reward in terms of for dementia and what we've been fighting for is hopefully going to be 10 times greater, plus, if we can raise £16 million, which I was asking for in that letter from the government, that's huge. And I hope with the climate change too, in terms of going to these places and hopefully as things continue to grow and I can share more about them and highlight these important causes, I hope that that's greater than the cost of the travel.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
That's the hope.
I mean, this is your job, right? And
of course.
You can't, there's only so much you can explore, locally. And I hope that maybe that kind of becomes part of the story in some of the things that you do in the future, is also appreciating what we have locally and finding the adventure and the exploration within that. But I do think there's definitely a place for someone like you to go around the globe and tell stories from different places. And if that is linked to the changing climate as well, and that story is present within what you do, then it's amazing because we can all see the journey through your eyes. And it's much better that one person does that rather than like hundreds and thousands of people go and do these journeys, right?
Okay.
So there's definitely a place for a global explorer. I'm certainly not kind of advocating against that. It's just an interesting topic to kind of think with global travel. Anyone who does global travel is to kind of at what purpose, at what cost.
I think that word purpose is the key word. That's a good word. What's your advice then?
Well, I think you really do have a great story behind you.
Very kind.
Honoring your father is fantastic. And, you know, the fact that you ticked off one of the things on this bucket list was something that you definitely had to do. And I think that's makes your story so much more worthwhile. And I think you've really now understood the power of that as a storytelling purpose behind what you're what you're able to achieve. And people need a story behind someone to kind of understand what they're fighting for.
For sure.
So I think as long as there's that within your storytelling, and there's like the best thing you can do with, you know, trying to raise awareness for global issues is travel to the global places and tell those stories from the heart of the people that are in them. You cannot do that from your own home. You need to go out and there's such a big place for travel and for finding how people live their lives in different countries, and it opens our world. And I've had my eyes open from all the global travel that I've done.
Amazing.
And I really hope that I can find some place in my life that I can kind of go off and experience a new culture again sometime in the near future. But how I do that and the purpose, I don't know. I just haven't myself got peace with that. But I know there's definitely also a lot of things that's happened in my life that has actually grounded me anyway, that regardless to what's been happening with the changing climate.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's a great answer. I think, that word peace is quite special there. And I mean, one of my dreams is that what I've found through adventure and the lessons I've learned, the confidence I've been given, all these things, I hope that others can find that, and especially the generations below us, right? But I also hope that they take, generation by generation, we take more care in, like you said, these important causes, in this case, the environment. But I hope they can find that balance, that harmony somewhere where they can go out and see the world. And like you said, you need to go to these places and shake people's hands and meet them and talk, because we need to grow and learn, and we need to understand other people, right? We get so much empathy and compassion from going to these places and meeting other people and understand more about other people's stories, whatever that background may be. But I hope they can do that with that balance. And I hope I can find that balance too. I hope I can.
Yeah, I think people following you will definitely be so engaged with whatever stories you can tell from whatever place you go in the world.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
I'm going to close things shortly. I think I just want to talk about your experience in the last few days, because actually you were suited and booted and knocked on number 10 Downing Street just a couple of days ago.
A little bit different, to the running kit in Antarctica. Suddenly, the suits on and you're going there. Yeah, we while I was in Antarctica, actually, my team at home very kindly received a letter from the Prime Minister's office inviting us down. It was a really nice letter, actually, crediting us for what we're all doing, because this is a team effort. And although I may be the one running, there's many people now involved in this. But we received an invite saying we could go down and deliver our letter to the door, and the Prime Minister was going to read our letter. So
this is an open letter that you published a few months ago, which is on your Instagram. It's like a 2-page letter, detailing a bit about your story and what you want the government to commit to with the investment with improving diagnostics within dementia.
100%. I mean, we talk about the big picture. As my challenges grow, so must my purpose. And raising the money for charity is wonderful. The awareness is wonderful. But now, what else can I do? And I was inspired by Lewis Pugh, actually, and what he's done in creating governmental change for what he cares about. And that was for ocean conservation. I thought, well, how could I maybe apply that to what I'm doing? In this case, I spoke to the experts and the team at Alzheimer's Research UK. They said they're about to launch this new campaign for this 16 million, which is so needed for dementia diagnostics. And I said, well, let me try. And I launched this letter on Sky News. I think I'd done 4 marathons at the point. I had 3 more to go. And we headed out to the Amazon, the Antarctic, carrying this letter, highlighting the global challenge for a global cause. And I delivered, 2 days ago, the actual letter. That was the one I carried in Antarctica. It wasn't the one from all 3, because I won't lie, the one in the Amazon got destroyed because they got hit with a rainstorm. And I made a decision I don't know why, I should have laminated it or something. But that was the actual one from Antarctica. So the decision is now out of our hands. It's with the government, it's with the PM. So we hope and pray that he reads it and listens. And, we can't control their decisions, but I hope over the last few months and this whole project, we've done enough for them to listen to what we're doing.
It's testament to all the hard work you've done in your message and your story that you got the invite from 10 Downing Street. that itself it just seems like such a great achievement worth celebrating.
I think so, to a degree. And actually, I found I didn't have any moment of celebration or closure when I finished Antarctica, because I knew I had to get home safely, and I knew I also had to deliver this letter. And actually, when I knocked on that door 3 times, and the night before I was doing some research and looking at people who have gone there, you had all these photos of royals and prime ministers and presidents and all these people, people who are, in many ways leading this world, making all these big decisions, and stood there going, God, these adventures in just a few years have brought me to 10 Downing Street. I knocked on the door those 3 times, and it felt like the closure of the project, and everything, maybe not to anyone else, but to me, it went dead silent, and I felt it right to my core. And it felt like the real end of the project. And it was like that moment of like, this is over. We've done this, but it's not the end. It's not the closure for my journey. It's just the closure for the project. So now me and my team will go away. We're already planning some greater adventures. We hope to have even greater impacts. But in the meantime, we'll keep an ear out for a reply from the Prime Minister. We're hoping to hear back from him this month with their thoughts and with their decision to what we've asked for, because I think it's deserved, and I hope they do too.
Such an iconic door, number 10.
Yeah.
You knocked on this door.
Yeah, 3 times.
Why 3 times? Is that a certain protocol, or was that just the traditional knock that you do on every door? Because it's typically a door that doesn't need to ever be knocked, because there's a doorman on the other side, right? And there's a camera, right? And they can see when people are walking in. So before the people get to the door opens.
That's true. I don't know why 3. Maybe it should have been 7 to highlight, the 7 marathons. It just felt right.
So what happened once you knocked the door?
So then someone came out, and they kindly took the letter, and we have their word. It's gonna. And I put it into an envelope. I put it into an envelope, and I wrote Prime Minister on it, and we have their promise that it's going to land on the Prime Minister's desk.
And it's got this postmark from Antarctica on it.
Yeah, it does. It does. So it's that letter is the one I actually carried in my pocket throughout. It's been carried through all those conditions, and it's now back home to 10 Downing Street. So, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, and I can't help in that regards for those affected by dementia. But I hope and pray I can use these adventures as a platform to raise this awareness and look after these important causes, because there's examples of people in history who have done it, and why can't I do it too? And me and my team have had a few bits of luck already, over the last few years, but it's time to keep going and keep growing. But yeah, I had 3 knocks. I don't know why, it just felt right. It's a good question. No one's asked that actually.
What a great thing to claim, that you have knocked on 10 Downing Street. I mean, just to even be close to that door, because it's protected around security, and just no one ever really actually gets close to it. There's very select people who are invited there.
It's true. We were very lucky to be invited. We had about 15 minutes actually outside the door, because we did a few videos and a few different things. The police officer was also lovely and kind, and the guy accepted the letter too. And but it doesn't mean anything unless they make the decision. So it's great, sure, on a personal note, and I'm sure hopefully it made my mum proud and things like that. But the actual reply from the Prime Minister is what I truly care about.
What are your dreams and aspirations in going forward, now that you've set this life of adventure and exploring and challenging yourself physically?
The ultimate dream would be to pioneer some big adventures which have never been done before. The ultimate dream too would be to, got some really incredible, especially in this podcast, important to talk about the British adventurers, ahead of us and who have led this way. And I think there is a space for a few of us to hopefully come through from our generation and sort of take over that flag and continue fly that flag of adventure. And I hope I can be part of that. I hope I can be one of those leading members. I won't be able to do it on my own. There needs to be a few of us, of course, at anything. But my goal would be to pioneer some adventures and have some huge impacts on what's really important to me and those around me. And that's the goal, that's the dream. But as long as I keep enjoying it, because as you know, you can't do any of this unless you enjoy it, because when those moments get tough and you're traversing across live ice on a mountain, or you're stuck in a rainstorm in the rainforest, you need to actually want to be there, because otherwise you won't get through it.
How do you find new, unique things that you can pioneer, right? Because so much of the world has been explored, but that's from my very limited knowledge of exploration. There must also be many areas of the world that still are unexplored? Is that what is appealing to you, is to go to these unexplored places?
I hope so. I think it's definitely tougher, of course, than it used to be. I think running is becoming really tough to sort of pioneer some big runs because, first of all, there's some amazing people out there doing some amazing things, but also it's getting tougher and tougher. So I can't, unfortunately, give you an answer of what's next just yet because I'm still working on the concepts, but I can tell you that it's not a run. I won't be doing any runs this year. I think I'm going to look a little bit more at those swims because there is a little bit more of those opportunities to pioneer some big things. And yeah, I think it's going to take a little bit of time to work those things out in the long scheme of what is possible to pioneer. Because you don't want to pioneer just for the sake of I'm going out, I just want to do it to be the first. No, you want to do it because you want to open up our own awareness and our own surroundings and our own knowledge of our world and the people and the wildlife and everything that makes it so amazing.
Yeah. So much of your story is your age at the moment because what you've achieved from such a young age. And it's been incredibly insightful to get a piece of you here today in this conversation of what it takes to build the foundations of an adventurous career that hopefully spans decades going forward. But it's so interesting to see what it takes to build that foundation now and how you are just doing different things. You're building those sideways blocks that strengthen your foundation, but you're not quite sure where the direction is going to go. And it's so exciting to kind of follow you now and to see which direction and which path that you will take. And it'd be so amazing to speak with you again in years' time or in a decade's time and see kind of what journey you've been on and how you've changed and evolved and how you've been able to find your little kind of way in the life. And there's no pressure to do that at the moment, I think, because you are so young. You can just afford to experiment and take lots of risks and try so many different things. And I think that's incredibly exciting to witness and follow.
You're very kind. Thank you. I really appreciate those words. It's been a real joy to chat. Thank you for your time, for the opportunity. And likewise, I'm excited to follow your story too, because you take some serious care and passion in your craft and in these podcasts. So I'm excited to see what's next for you too.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Louis. Really, really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes where you will also find links to things mentioned in the conversations. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find. And I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.